If you're looking to buy your first camera and you're on a relatively limited budget, or maybe you're just looking for a cheap alternative to a camera you already have, you're probably looking at one of a couple of options. That would be something like the new-ish Sony ZV-E10, or maybe one of the older a6000 series, this being the oldest, the Sony a6000. So first off, let's talk about why I'm comparing these two cameras in particular, the Sony ZV-E10 and the Sony a6000. Brand new, if you look at these on Amazon, they're both roughly around $800 if you buy it, the body and the kit lens. The key difference between these two cameras, obviously, are that this one, the ZV-E10, is new and the a6000 is quite old. You can pick this up for a lot cheaper if you're willing to shop used. So that's kind of the first main thing you got to think about when comparing cameras like this. Are you willing to shop used? If yes, I picked up this camera for $220, which is a crazy good deal on a camera like this. And it holds up really well by today's standards. As for what is similar between these two cameras, they both have a 24 megapixel sensor, which is it's a great sensor on both of these cameras. It can capture a great image. They can both take photos up to 11 frames per second. They're both very small. They use the NPF50W something. Yeah, NPF-W50 battery, which is very small and doesn't last very long. So that's honestly one of the biggest cons of these small mirrorless cameras that Sony makes. These batteries are not very good, so you're going to need to get lots of them. Thankfully, they're very cheap though. So they both use the same battery. They have a similar layout. Actually, the older camera, the a6000, has more buttons available to you. But overall size and weight are incredibly similar between these two cameras. And honestly, that's kind of about it. I mean, there's probably some more little details, but nothing that, in my opinion, matters hugely, as they are relatively different. And I think they are also for different audiences. So a couple of weeks ago, I made a video about the Sony a6000 and mainly talking about its photography specs and compared it to a Sony a7 III. I put photos side by side and did a blind comparison test and got people to comment down below which one they thought was the Sony a6000. And when looking through the comment section, almost half of the people who commented got it wrong. Camera A was the Sony a6000 and camera B was the Sony a7 III. And honestly, I have to go back and check quite frequently which one was which, because I think they hold up really well, especially when you put it through YouTube or Instagram. They hold up really, really well. So for photography, for the price, if you're willing to shop used, the Sony a6000 is an absolutely incredible deal. The autofocus is not perfect, but it's very, very good in photography mode. So I think when it comes to these two cameras, what I think it boils down to really is, what is your budget? Are you willing to shop used? And what are you using it for? So first off, let's talk about the price and budget. If you're only going to be buying a new camera, I really don't think there's a huge amount of reasons to buy the Sony a6000, unless you really, really need an EVF. That's kind of like the main difference body-wise between these two cameras. If you really need an EVF and you hate that the ZV-E10 doesn't have an EVF, then maybe this is worth it. So I think it's definitely worth the money if you're only buying new to go with the ZV-E10. It is a fantastic little camera with a huge amount of lens options and tons of stuff that you can do with it. On the other hand, if you're willing to shop used, you can pick up this camera. Typically, I've seen quite a few of them go for around $300. I got this one for a lot less, at $220, which meant that I was able to get this and a few lenses for $300-400, which is crazy. Because I think for that amount of money, this camera is a no-brainer. But again, only on one condition, because where this camera really falls short is its video features. For photography, this camera is fantastic. I actually preferred using this camera for photography than I do the ZV-E10 for photography, mainly because I like having an EVF. But overall, like just for photography, I think this Sony a6000, if you're willing to shop used, is an absolutely fantastic deal. For video features though, is where things really change. This is where the ZV-E10 really shines. The Sony a6000 can do video. It can only do 1080p video, which is fine. You can get by with 1080p, no problem, especially if you're doing vertical video. You're only going to be uploading anything in 1080p anyway. But it doesn't have any picture profiles. I like to film everything in HLG and color grade it afterwards because it gives me a lot more flexibility. This doesn't have any picture profiles. The ZV-E10 does. Not only that, the ZV-E10 can also film in 4K, which just gives you more flexibility. I find the image holds up a little bit better when it comes to color grading. The autofocus is a lot better, a lot more reliable, a bit faster. You can get sort of eye tracking, which you don't have in the a6000. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure you don't. And it's got a lot more features that are just aimed towards videographers. So that's really what it boils down to. This is kind of a quick video. I wanted to recap the Sony a6000 for photography purposes, because again, that last video Again, almost half the amount of people who watched that video and commented got it wrong and thought that this was a A7 III. So again, if you're doing photography on a budget, this is the camera to go for by far, if you're willing to shop used. But if you're going to buy new, ZV-E10, definitely the way to go. It's going to hold up really well. So I want to know what you think. What's important to you when you purchase a camera, and what would be your recommendation to beginners looking to buy a first camera? So if you're a beginner, check the comments down below. You might find some good insight from some people down below who's leaving a comment, because there's tons and tons of cameras to choose from today, and I don't think there's necessarily a wrong camera to go with. It just depends on your skill level and how much you're willing to learn to make your camera work for you. So drop a comment down below, hit the like button while you're down there if you've enjoyed the video, and maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. Thank you so much for doing so. I hope you have a wonderful day.